few days ago, I finished a 30-day experiment where I removed all push notifications from my phone. Now, this was inspired by a guy I follow on Twitter, Peter Levels, who's an entrepreneur and a programmer, and he tweeted about this after reading some New York Times article. I think he might have been doing this for a while, but after seeing him tweet about the fact that he'd removed all push notifications from his phone and just realizing I needed to improve certain aspects of my life, I decided to just give it a shot. Very least, it's 30 days. If it's not a good change, then, what's the big deal? So why I did this? The number one reason I did it is because I'm unemployed. And when you're unemployed, it's really easy to slack off. Like if you're in an office, you have deadlines. People are watching you. Like it's harder to slack off. You have a deadline you have to hit on Friday. There's work you have to do and get it done. It's a deliverable to somebody else. If you don't, you might get fired or punished. But when you're writing your own book and you're at home, step 1 is created by you. Step 2 is created by you. Step 3, everything is created by you. Deadlines are set up by you. So it's insanely easy to slack off. It takes a lot of discipline to actually sit down and do work when nobody's forcing it on you. And more importantly, getting into flow state is a really big deal. And I find that the phone kind of gets in the way of that. Because if I'm sitting down working and I'm really in the zone and all of a sudden, ding, it's hard for me not to check that. Especially if it's a certain type of audible noise to where I know it's, a text message and not a Twitter notification. Then I know somebody's trying to get a hold of me. Is it an emergency? Oh my God. I check it and completely throws you out of your flow state, just out of your rhythm. So that was one reason I wanted to do it. I also noticed my level of focus, or at least my perception of it, seems to be lower than it was in college. When I was in college, it felt like if I needed to do work, I could just sit down and do work, crank it out, and then I could do whatever else it is that I wanted to do. I think part of it was that I wasn't using social media nearly as much. Instagram, I had an account, but I didn't use it all that much. It wasn't as big as it is today. Snapchat wasn't even around. Twitter, I had an account, didn't really use it. Facebook was the big one I used. Whereas now, when I'm checking my phone, it's almost always going to be Twitter, Snapchat, or Instagram. It's one of those three. That's pretty much the only reason I have a phone almost. Why I didn't do it was to think I'm better than everybody else. Like, if you tell people you do this, they almost take it as an insult. They're like, oh, okay, you're so much better than... I'm like, no, I just feel I have distractions in my life. This might be one of them, so I'm going to try and remove it. People take it as some sort of Luddite high ground, oh, I don't need these types of things. No, it has nothing to do with that. I kind of think of it like a frog in boiling water effect. Stick a frog in water, slowly increase the heat, and it never realizes how hot it got. So I kind of thought about this in the same way. Maybe it's been a part of me for so long, I don't realize how much of a distraction it really is because I've become so conditioned to it and just so used to it. So how did I go about doing this? Thankfully, iPhone makes it pretty easy. If you just go to settings, notification, it has an entire list of apps where you can just go through and turn off the push notifications for each one. And you can even change it to where it's just a certain type of notification so you don't get this audible ding. You only get a notification once you actually pick up your phone and open it, which I think is okay because I'm more concerned about doing something and then just having this background noise. That is annoying to me. Whereas if I'm checking my phone, okay, I'm checking my phone. I don't care if I'm getting an Instagram notification then because I've actually committed to the act of checking my phone. That's very different. On top of the app-by-app restrictions, you can actually restrict certain websites as well. So you can go into settings, general restrictions, and then you can go down and even select certain websites that you want to block within Safari. So, if you find yourself checking YouTube a lot, you can actually restrict youtube.com from Safari entirely. And then the other thing I do, which I've always kind of done, or at least try to do, is just keep my phone out of arm's reach. If I'm sitting down to work, don't have it right next to me because the impulse is there. So just, know your true being, keep that shit away. And then also, if I do have it close to me, just at least put it face down, which isn't that much of a deal anymore because I didn't have push notifications on. Now, the results. What did I get from this? I won't lie and say all of a sudden I'm this crazy workhorse and I'm always in flow state. I never get distracted. No, none of that. Of course, you're still going to get distracted. Of course, you're still going to procrastinate, all that thing. But I will say I'm a little bit closer to it because I don't have that ding. I don't have that noise. If I'm working and I hear that, it's really hard for me not to check it. And even if I don't check it, I still took a second to acknowledge the fact that that's there. So if you're like just real deep in work, that's just a distraction. So I just got rid of that. I'm a little bit closer because I don't have that there. I don't have the urge to just, it'll only take a minute, go check it. And when you consider the fact that this thing seems to have like some sort of, it distorts your time. Like even if I'm like, okay, I'll just check it real quick and then I'll be done. I'll go check Twitter and I think I'm only on it for a minute. And then before I know it, I'm 10 minutes in. I'm like, holy shit. So that's another reason, or that's another benefit to it. You don't get sucked into that time distortion where 10 minutes later you're like, oh shit, what am I doing? So that's been a good benefit. A couple weird things. You become very conscious of using it because now if you don't have push notifications, if you reach for it, it's an actual act. You're doing whatever it is that you're doing and you're like, let me go check my phone. Like you're very aware of it. It's no longer some audible noise that's luring you in. Now you're just sitting there working and you realize, oh, I'm getting bored. I want a distraction. I know, I'll go check my... You become so aware of that I think it's a good thing. And I didn't realize how much of an impact that would actually have on me. So I realize now how easily I am distracted by the phone. The one way I can think about describing this is it being like an itch that you always scratched, but then you suddenly realize you had the ability to turn it off. So it's like every day you're scratching this itch, and then finally one day somebody says, you know, if you could just turn that off. And then you do, but for the next couple of days, you find yourself scratching, and then you're like, wait, I don't even have an itch there. Why am I doing this? And you're like, oh, that's how much of a habit this really is. That was one very, very weird part. I mean, the first few days, it actually felt like there was some sort of emptiness. Like there was almost something missing in my house. Like, wait, am I missing a couch here or something? Like just the noise. That was it. And it felt like something was missing. And after a couple days, it kind of went away. But those first few days, it was weird that just one little thing, just removing audible push notifications from your phone, literally made my environment feel just slightly emptier. It was bizarre. So going forward, I'm keeping notifications off. I see no reason to turn them back on because now whenever I reach for my phone, it's like an actual conscious act. And I can do it in between, bursts of work. So I work for a little bit and then I'm like, okay, let me go see what everybody else is up to. Then I check my phone. Then I run through all the accounts. Not this, I'm working and then every time somebody's tapping me on the shoulder, I go, what? And then I go back to work. What? Go back to work. Now it's just, chunking time. So I set aside time just for that. Next step, I think, might be distractions on my computer. One thing I already do is I separate my work environment from everything else. So I don't have my work desk where I sit down and write code, where I sit down and write my book. I don't have that right next to my Xbox. The Xbox is in the living room. Netflix is in the living room. TV is in the living room. I keep that environment just for work so I have no distractions. The problem is your computer is a distraction because your computer has Twitter, your computer has Instagram and Facebook and all that other stuff. So next step might be doing self-control. Maybe I'll disable a list of websites for a couple hours so that I just work. And then once those couple hours are up, then I go check my other stuff. So that might be the next step because, like I said, I'm not perfect yet. I'm not this super efficient workhorse. Of course, I still get distracted. Of course, I have the urge to procrastinate. So that might be the next step. But so far, I would say that this has been surprisingly effective and showed me that I was actually more of a frog in boiling water than I'd originally thought.